I'm joined by Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves Jonathan Conricus, the former international spokesman for the IDF, as well as a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Jonathan, great to have you with us on I24 News, as always. Abu Obaida, this is a man many people refer to as the face of Hamas, and now he's been eliminated after spreading these Hamas propaganda and PR lies, according to the IDF. I'm curious, in your opinion, why is this such a significant elimination?
I'm not entirely sure that it is. He is a symbol. Spokespeople are symbols, and sometimes it can be a very dangerous job to be a spokesperson. A lot of the focus on an entire organization is kind of channeled through one person for good and for the bad. And he was a symbol of Hamas's their pride and joy in murdering Israelis, their psychological terror, and abuse of Israeli hostages. And this is a guy who was doing that job for about 10 or so years. Not only a hidden face behind cloth, but actually also a guy that managed and provided strategy and was a guiding hand and one of the last seniors of Hamas, that generation that came up with the idea of October 7 and executed it. So in that sense, it is a symbolic event. I don't know how it will influence Hamas's activities in terms of media. Sadly, they've been doing pretty well despite being defeated on the battlefield. They continue to operate in the realm of Operation Psychological Warfare. Some would say, sadly, gaining more success than Israel does at certain extents. Definitely, they have a lot of help from willing Western media, but nevertheless, they've been doing combat footage and they've been disseminating footage and messaging campaigns, and this is the guy who has been behind it. So that will probably put a dent in their ability to message. How will it influence, getting hostages back? How will it push Hamas towards understanding that their days are over? I don't know. But it's definitely a good thing. And of course, credit to IDF and Shabak for getting the job done.
Well, as far as influencing actual operations inside the Gaza Strip, IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir, he said most of the remaining Hamas leaders, they're abroad, as you just hinted at as well, and that Israel is going to go after those leaders as well. But is this the real way then to topple Hamas? How much of an influence do these leaders abroad actually have on whatever leaders that are still left in the Gaza Strip?
I think that is actually a very, very important statement, because it's a first of a kind by a sitting IDF Chief of Staff, and if it is really going to happen, it signifies a change in strategy, because up until now, the so-called external leadership of Hamas has been living at large in Doha, Qatar, in various cities in Turkey, some places in Egypt, and in some places in North Africa. If the IDF Chief of Staff says this, then it lends to believe that there is an action plan, and if I were one of them, I would be worried. And it could be that Israel is signaling this because up until now, Israel has been able to detect and eliminate most, if not all, of the key players in Hamas Gaza. Up until now, Hamas overseas has been out of bounds, and Israel has made a strategic decision not to engage them. And they have been able to live lavish lives with the very warm hospitality of the Qataris and in Turkey. Now, what Israel could achieve by doing so, by actually engaging them, is to send messages to these very important countries, three important countries, Qatar, Turkey, and Egypt, and impress upon them that if you don't rein Hamas in, then we will bring trouble to your borders. And that could signal a change. And it's also probably because Israel is kind of running out of high-value targets. Most of the senior terrorists have been eliminated. There's one guy of real importance in Gaza, Izzadin al-Haddad, and the rest, most of them are outside of Gaza.
Yes. We don't know them anymore. They keep bringing new leaders to the top, it seems. So perhaps you're absolutely correct that this big news could come that Israel is extending its search elsewhere. Meanwhile, Jonathan, we are learning some new information now about U.S. President Donald Trump's great plan for post-war Gaza. Yes, that is what it's called, the Gaza Reconstitution Economic Acceleration and Transformation Trust. The Washington Post leaked a 38-page PowerPoint on the Trump administration's big plans. The title, From a Demolished Iranian Proxy to a Prosperous Abrahamic Ally. where in 10 years, the Gaza Strip is transformed into a high-tech manufacturing hub and a tourism resort under a trusteeship administered by the United States. Now, under these plans, all 2 million Gazans would be relocated, either through voluntary departures to unnamed countries or into restricted security zones inside the Strip during reconstruction. Palestinians who choose to leave, they would get $5,000 in cash, rent subsidies for 4 years, and a year's worth of food. And this is the cheaper option for the trust compared to those who stay in Gaza and need temporary housing, which would cost roughly $23,000 more. Jonathan, it all sounds great on paper. No U.S. government funding, mega projects that include electric vehicle factories, beach resorts, high-rise apartments. It's unfathomable to think about this in the Gaza Strip, but does it address the real problem? The Gazans themselves, from what we've been hearing, they don't want to leave the Gaza Strip if it's to a place like South Sudan. So is this actually a feasible plan?
So I would love for it to happen, but perhaps it's too good to be true. Too good in the sense of it promises too much and it paints too pink of a picture for the future. I think what it needs to tackle, what everybody who wants to deal with progress in the Middle East needs to tackle, is the core issue of Palestinian obstructionism. And Palestinian obstructionism and its European and Arab support will be the strongest enemy of this plan, even though the plan could be great, and even though, if implemented, it probably would be the best thing to happen to the Gaza Strip and to the people who live there for generations. But I think the chances are slim because Palestinian obstructionism and the idea that Palestinian statehood must happen according to a certain cookie-cutter paste that Arab countries and a few European countries have determined is a very powerful force, and it doesn't really get confused with logic. Logic would say, get the people out, rebuild the place, get foreign investment, and do something good and change the trajectory of that wretched piece of earth, Gaza, and change the trajectory in the future of the people who live there. That makes pretty much sense. But what doesn't make sense is this very, I would say, irrational insistence on Palestinian statehood, that it must come no matter what atrocities they do, no matter how poorly they govern themselves, no matter how hostile they are to their neighbors, they must have statehood. And we're going to, I believe, discuss declarations about Palestinian statehood and rest. It's all connected. So this could be a great plan. I struggle to see it implemented because there will be irrational people that cling on to dreams of the past that will put wrenches in the machinery just not to see this done.
Jonathan, what are your views? Because as these flotillas come, and maybe 70 ships this time, they're lose-lose situations for Israel, because as Joe just stated, no matter how Israel handles this, the international media and the publicity and these PR stunts, they take their own narrative, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, this is a selfie flotilla. There was a selfie boat before, now it's a flotilla. They are basically raising the stakes and making it more challenging for Israel to intercept and to prepare. This will demand a different tactical response from the Israeli Navy. Israel will have to deploy further out in order to intercept them, because we're talking about a much larger number, to make sure that they don't really are able to, that they won't be able to approach the Gaza waters or breach through. And I really hope that cooler heads will prevail in Israel and that this won't be used as a publicity stunt for domestic purposes in Israel, whereby a heavy-handed and not very intelligent approach might be taken. I hope that Israel continues to be patient and to be understanding of what they're trying to do. They are trying to get publicity. They are trying to smear the name of Israel. They are trying to make Israel and the IDF and Israeli government look bad. And what Israel needs to do is to defuse the bomb, to do it sternly and to do it smartly. My only comment would be that repeat offenders like Greta Thunberg should not be exported quickly and without any issues. I think that if you make one mistake, anybody could make one mistake, but if you come here twice, you violate international law, you do dangerous things, you put other people at risk, and you cause unnecessary risk for IDF, there should be a consequence to pay. But Israel has to be smart and calibrated and clever about it. Up until now, Israeli decision makers have been, and I really hope that we're not going to deviate from that line.
Well, we will be following this flotilla as it is set to come here about September 14th or 15th. Correspondent Joe Brown, thank you for that update. Back here in studio with Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves, Jonathan Conricus. Jonathan, Israel's preparing for some sort of retaliation, but what capabilities do the Houthis have? We just took out many of their leaders. Israel has greatly diminished the Houthi capabilities. So what is still on the table?
No, I think a lot is still on the table. Rockets, missiles, drones are still on the table, and Israel has struck significant political and military echelons, but it hasn't really taken their military capabilities away from the Houthis. So we should anticipate continued attacks. Maybe now that they've had their noses bloodied a bit, maybe they will be more violent. Maybe they will try to strike targets, close other maritime targets, maybe do some even more bizarre things. You know, a few weeks ago, they went on this campaign about marching to Gaza, attacking Israel on the ground. They may try to facilitate such an attack, and I wouldn't think that it's an impossible thing for the Houthis to do. The key word here is that finally Israel demonstrated intelligence, real-time intelligence capabilities, what Israel has been excellent, probably best in the world at doing around other places, whether it's Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Iran, and Iraq. Today, for the first time, high-level Israeli attack on important live targets with good successes. And now Israel will continue down that path and target the leadership of the Houthis.
Still with me in studio is Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves Jonathan Conricus. Jonathan, is this a reasonable response coming from Israel, or are there better measures that Israel can do to deter a Palestinian state? Because some argue that this could embolden countries that are going forward with recognizing a Palestinian state no matter what. And by annexing parts of the West Bank, they're just going to make those voices stronger.
Well, this is Israel's response. I mean, Israel is responding to what I think are terribly erroneous decisions by European states that may think that they are building the future of a Palestinian state, but what they are is strengthening Hamas. And I think that their read on the situation is very naive and really does a disservice. If they really want to improve the conditions for Palestinians, then they should be focusing on getting rid of Hamas and making clear that Hamas doesn't have any standing. Because if there is a Palestinian state directly after October 7, the party that will gain from it and will be translated into electoral gains will be Hamas, not the weak and corrupt Palestinian Authority. So I think Israel is responding. Israel, mind you, has done that hold me back trick once in the past when we were just before writing or signing the Abraham Accords in order to basically get the other signatories to cross the last miles and to really sign the deal. There was a threat on the table by Israel that if it doesn't happen, then we will indeed, what Israel calls, apply Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. And that appeared to have worked, and the Abraham Accords were signed, and the Arab Emirates and the other countries are part of it. So it's been on the table for quite a while. And I think that Israel will continue to make the steps in order to be ready to apply it. But then it doesn't have to be a full-scale application of Israeli law or annexation. It could be partial. It could only be, for instance, one part would be the Jordan Valley, and then certain clusters of Israeli settlements or communities. It could be those two combined, or it could be an expansive one, which would be all of the territory, which would put Israel in a very challenging situation when it comes to having around 3 million, a little bit more than 3 million Arabs living in sovereign Israeli territory, which is something that I think Israel will want to prevent. But in any case, this has been fast-tracked because of European action, which I think is very, very naive and just not doing any good, not for Israel, not for Palestinians. What I think is that this issue, which the world has been so fixated with for at least 77, 78 years, I think we should apply some creative, new, fresh thinking and really address the problem. And perhaps most importantly, in case Europeans are listening, listen to the people on the ground. Listen to what Palestinians say. Listen to what Jews say. None of these sides are interested in the blueprint of the situation or solution that you're providing. So I think we should be thinking about different things that are better suited to local culture and that may have a chance of working.
And the people on the outside don't seem to truly have a touch with what is happening on the inside.
No, it's quite imperialistic and a bit colonial.
As we usually see with many of these European powers. Jonathan, you say that this is Israel's response to these countries coming up with this Palestinian state. And it seems Israel continues to be on the response side. But when is Israel going to be on the offensive? Should they have a more aggressive stance when it comes to this? All comes back to diplomacy, it seems, and public opinion. Does Israel need to be taking more of an aggressive stance at countering these claims then?
I wouldn't say an aggressive stance. I would say that what's needed is tremendous investment by Israel in soft power, in diplomacy, in fighting in the realm of information, hearts and minds. I wouldn't say that. I don't think that we lack anything in terms of aggressive power. I think we are perceived as very aggressive, sometimes justified, sometimes not justified. What I think we should be doing is investing the creativity, the great minds, and the great human capital that we have in Israel on acquiring more soft power, on having more diplomats, men and women, on having more spokespeople, on reaching out, on doing more things that are grassroots level that will maybe allow people to see Israel in a different light, not through the lens of conflict, but through different lights. And I think that is where we're lacking. The moment that we will do that in sincerity, with massive investment in it, I think that would be tremendously beneficial for Israel, and it'll be good for our neighbors as well.
And it's important to have voices like yours that continue to spread what's happening here. Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy is Jonathan Conricus. It's great to have you as always.
Thank you.